Emma's perfect world. Emma sat in a small, cozy cafe on a Brooklyn corner, sipping a caramel latte. She loved this place. It always smelled of fresh pastries and vanilla, and the large windows overlooked the bustling streets of New York. She was waiting for Nick, her boyfriend of almost a year. Nick seemed perfect, tall, charismatic, with confidence in his eyes and a voice that could charm anyone. He told her he worked for an investment firm where he provided financial consulting for big clients. Emma loved listening to him talk about his work even though she didn't understand much of it. But most importantly, she trusted him. When he finally showed up, his smile was as flawless as ever, but something about him seemed a little different. "Hello, darling," he kissed her cheek and sat down across from her. "You look tired," Emma noticed. "Oh, it's been a crazy day," he sighed and took a sip of coffee. "The clients have gone crazy, the stocks are going up and down." Emma smiled. She loved listening to his stories even if they seemed a little boring. "By the way," she gently put her hand on his palm, "my friend Laura says her father works in investments too. What company are you with? Maybe they know each other." Nick held his breath for a second and then quickly looked away. "Oh, we're in such a specific field." "I don't think they've crossed paths," he sounded too confident. Emma noticed this change but didn't push. She didn't want to spoil the beautiful evening. But this time a small suspicion grew in her heart, subtle but sharp as a needle. For the next few weeks, Emma couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. She noticed small details that she had previously ignored. Nick never answered his phone when he was at work, his schedule was chaotic, and his answers to questions about his career sounded too general. One night she decided to surprise him and cook dinner at his apartment. She had a key. Nick had given it to her a few months ago when their relationship became more serious. When she opened the door, she immediately smelled a strange odor, not alcohol, not perfume. Something else. The apartment was untidy, and there was an open pack of cigarettes on the table even though Nick said he didn't smoke. Weird, Emma thought, but forced herself to calm down. When Nick returned, he looked surprised and nervous. "Oh, you're here?" He smiled tightly. "I thought I'd surprise you," she said, noticing how tense he was. During dinner, he had received several messages and quickly hid them. "Is someone writing to you?" she asked calmly. "Oh, just work stuff, nothing important," Nick replied hastily. But that little suspicion that had been planted in her heart the last time had begun to grow. And this time she wasn't going to ignore it. The next morning, Emma decided to check something out. She remembered that Nick had once shown her a business card for his company. She didn't remember the name but decided to look for it in her things. After a few minutes of searching, she found it in a box of small items. The business card was expensive looking, with embossed letters, Westbridge Capital. Emma opened her phone and entered the name into the search. She got a few results, but none of them had anything to do with Nick. She looked at the list of employees on the official website and his name didn't appear. Her heart beat faster. She decided to go ahead and called the company. "Good afternoon," she greeted, trying to remain calm. "I was wondering if Nicholas Hudson works for you." There was silence on the other end of the line for a second. "I'm sorry, but we don't have an employee like that," a woman's voice replied. Emma hung up and froze. Nick was lying, but why? What was he hiding? This was the first real crack in their relationship, and she knew there was no turning back. Emma felt like she was in a nightmare. She couldn't believe that Nick would lie to her about something so important. But the main question remained open: why? That evening she decided to go to him again. But this time she didn't warn him. When she approached his house, she saw Nick coming out. Not in a business suit as usual, but in jeans and a sports jacket. He moved quickly down the street, unaware that Emma was following. He turned into a small alley and she saw him enter a dark bar. Breathlessly, she walked closer and looked inside. Nick was standing behind the bar, not as a customer but as a bartender. He was calmly pouring someone a whiskey, joking with the customers, and he looked nothing like he did in their normal lives. Emma felt a wave of anger wash over her. He wasn't a financial advisor. He didn't work for an investment firm. It was all a lie. But now the most important question remained: why did he do it? Emma didn't know how long she stood in front of the bar, watching Nick casually chatting with the customers. Her heart was pounding in her chest and her hands were shaking with rage. Finally, she took a deep breath and went inside. Nick was standing behind the bar when their eyes met. At first his eyes widened in shock, but a second later he put on his usual smile. "Emma? What are you doing here?" She stepped closer and crossed her arms over her chest. "Oh, just checking in on my finance guy." Her voice was calm, but it was filled with menace. Nick swallowed his saliva. "I can explain." "Oh, I don't doubt it," she scoffed. "So what kind of explanation is that? I've been dating a bartender all this time, not a financial advisor?" He looked around nervously as if searching for an escape route. Emma, listen. It's not what you think. What is it, Nick? He sighed and ran his hand over his face. I didn't want you to think the worst of me. You're so smart, so successful. And I just work in a bar. Emma felt her anger mix with her frustration. And for that you built a whole lie? If you had just told me the truth, I might have understood. But now, I don't even know who you are. Nick remained silent and Emma realized that there was no more trust. A tense silence hung between them. The bar continued to live its life. Someone was laughing, someone was arguing about baseball, someone was ordering another glass of whiskey. Tell me honestly, she finally said, clenching her fists, why did you do it? Why did you lie to me for months? Nick sighed heavily. I was afraid you wouldn't take me seriously if you knew the truth. You're so ambitious, you have a good job, plans for the future. I'm just a bartender. Her voice broke. So you thought it was better to lie than to let me make my own choice? I thought I could get out of it, he admitted. I thought I'd find something better before you knew. Emma closed her eyes, trying to hold back her anger. I would never have judged you for your work. But now I can't trust you. Nick looked confused as if he had just realized what he had done. Please give me a chance to fix this, he whispered. Emma looked into his eyes. It doesn't matter anymore, Nick. You can't restore trust with words. She turned around and walked out of the bar, leaving him behind along with his lies. The cold night air hit her face as she stepped outside. Her heart was racing and her hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the emotions that were tearing her apart. She loved Nick. But what kind of love was that if it was based on a lie? Her phone vibrated in her pocket as Nick texted her. Emma, please, let's talk. I don't want to lose you. She wanted to answer, to give him another chance to explain, to justify himself. But something inside her told her it wouldn't change what had happened. She put the phone back in her pocket and went home. The next few days were difficult. She avoided Nick, didn't answer his calls or open his messages. Her friends noticed that something was wrong with her, but she didn't want to talk about it. One evening, Laura, her closest friend, finally got her to tell the truth. Do you miss him? She asked quietly as they sat in Emma's apartment with a bottle of wine. Emma looked at her friend and answered honestly, yes. But I miss the person he seemed to be even more. Laura took her hand. You deserve someone who will be honest with you. Emma nodded silently, knowing that Laura was right. But there was still an emptiness inside her that nothing could fill. A week passed, but Emma couldn't completely get rid of her thoughts about Nick. She kept catching herself wanting to check his social media to find out what he was doing, if he was sorry. One evening, on her way home from work, she passed the same bar. Her feet stopped on their own, her heart started to beat faster. Through the window, she saw Nick. He was standing behind the bar, talking to some customers. He didn't seem to have changed at all, but then something unexpected happened. A slender brunette girl in a red dress approached him. She leaned over to Nick, said something to him, and he laughed. He laughed as if everything in his life was great. As if he hadn't recently begged Emma for a chance to make things right. Her heart sank. She expected him to be sad, to be sorry. But he seemed to have already moved on. It was an epiphany. She stood there on the sidewalk and realized that she too had to move on. And this time without him. The next morning, Emma woke up with a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, she didn't check her phone for messages from Nick. He no longer had any power over her. She decided to fill her time with things that brought her joy. She signed up for yoga classes, met up with friends, and started spending more time at work. And, most importantly, she stopped living in anticipation of an apology that no longer mattered. One day Laura suggested a little weekend trip. You need a change of scenery, she said. Let's go to the Hamptons, enjoy the sea, and forget about all this drama. Emma smiled. Sounds perfect. She knew that healing didn't come overnight. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was moving in the right direction. Nick was in the past. And her future was ahead. The Hamptons was the perfect place to reboot. The ocean breeze, the sound of the waves, and the carefree atmosphere helped Emma finally exhale. She and Laura rented a small house by the beach, spent days walking barefoot on the sand, drinking cocktails, and laughing like old times. On Saturday night, they decided to go to a local restaurant. It was crowded, but very cozy, fires, live music, a light aroma of seafood in the air. Let's drink to new opportunities, Laura suggested, raising her glass. Emma smiled and nodded. To a new beginning. As they clinked their glasses, her eyes accidentally met a stranger's. He was sitting at the bar, looking calm, but there was something warm and interested in his eyes. He smiled. And this time, Emma did not look away. Perhaps fate was already preparing a new story for her. That evening, a stranger approached their table. He was tall, with dark hair and a soft but confident voice. I'm sorry to intrude, but you two seem so happy that I couldn't help but notice, he said, standing next to her. Laura, of course, immediately reacted with her characteristic energy. Oh, that's so nice of you. We're just celebrating new beginnings, she laughed and then nudged Emma with a look. This is my friend Emma and my name is Laura. Emma smiled, though she was a little surprised at how easily Laura made introductions. I'm James, the stranger said, sitting down at the table. And I just thought it might be fun to meet someone new in such a beautiful place. Emma felt a slight wave of curiosity wash over her. She still carried the shadow of her past relationship with Nick, but this was the first time she had really met someone who wasn't part of her old story. And most importantly, she began to feel that maybe all was not lost. Are you from this town? Emma asked, trying to overcome her reticence. No, I'm here on vacation from New York, James replied, looking at her carefully. And you? We're just here for the weekend to get away from the routine, Laura replied. But if you want to join us, we'd be happy to. Emma looked at James again. There was nothing heavy or foggy in his eyes, only pure interest. She felt her heart begin to open up to new possibilities again. After a few minutes of conversation, James joined their table. They talked about everything from their favorite places in New York to the movies they had each recently seen. The atmosphere was light and Emma felt her tension slowly dissipate. No one mentioned the past, Nick's lies, or painful moments. They were just living in the moment, laughing and enjoying each other's company. Do you mind if I leave you my number? James asked as the evening drew to a close. It would be interesting to meet again to discuss everything we didn't have time to. Emma was embarrassed, but Laura immediately answered for her, nodding in approval. We'd love to, she said. You don't know how good it was to get away for a while. James handed over his card with his phone number and they said goodbye. Emma took the card, thanked him, and seemed to feel a new space in her heart for something new. On the way back to the lodge, Laura couldn't contain her joy. I like him, Emma. You had a great conversation with him, you even look alike. Emma smiled, but there was a strange anxiety in her heart. Was she ready for a new relationship? Was she ready to open her heart again after everything that had happened with Nick? These questions were still unanswered, but she felt that it was the right thing to do, not to run away from new opportunities, but to embrace them. That night when they returned to the lodge, Emma couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept coming back to James. His friendly gaze, his listening, and his openness all seemed so simple and natural, whereas her relationship with Nick had been built on constant back and forth and lies. She couldn't deny that she was drawn to him, but something inside her screamed, take your time. Nevertheless, the morning sun brought new thoughts. After a few cups of coffee on the terrace, Emma took James' card out of her bag and looked at the number. She didn't feel like she was ready for a new relationship, but she had a feeling that this could be the first step to something new. And it wasn't meant to be a competition or a comparison with Nick. This was her own story. I'll call him, she decided, putting the card back in her bag. The day was sunny and calm, and in the afternoon Emma received a message from James. Hi, Emma. I hope you're having a great time. If you want, I can show you a couple of places to see here. I'd be happy to take you. She looked at the screen for a long time, weighing every word. Finally, she said, that sounds great. Thank you for the offer. She had a new plan. No planning, no fear, just living. That day, James arranged a real tour of the Hamptons for them. They visited an old lighthouse, walked along the streets with old houses, and then sat down for tea in a small cafe that smelled of fresh pastries. Communication with him was simple and carefree, and in his presence Emma began to forget about all the heavy emotions she had been carrying around after breaking up with Nick. James didn't try to overshadow her thoughts about the past, he was just there, attentive and caring, not needing anything from her but her company. It was evening and they were sitting on the terrace of a restaurant enjoying the view of the ocean. James looked at her with warmth in his eyes. I'm glad we met, Emma. It's nice to meet someone who isn't afraid to be themselves. She smiled, feeling her heart open a little. It was so different, not like with Nick. It was slow and unforced. She didn't have to try to be perfect for him to stay by her side. I'm glad too, she replied, looking at his smile. I just want to be honest with myself and with others. It's hard, but it seems to be the only right thing to do. He nodded, understanding her. Although there was no hint of romance between them, there was something special about their conversations that made Emma feel like life could return to her with new hope. The evening ended, but an important conclusion remained in Emma's mind. She was learning to rediscover herself and give new things a chance without looking back at old mistakes. As the days passed, Emma began to appreciate the time she spent with James more and more. They talked about various topics, from music to books, and with each new moment she realized how important it was to give herself a chance to regain trust in other people even if the past had not yet completely let go. After one of their walks on the beach, James offered her dinner at a restaurant overlooking the sea. They were sitting at a table on the terrace with a breathtaking view of the sunset. "I'm glad we met," James said, looking at Emma. "To be honest, I thought I would go home and forget all this, but it seems the Hamptons have plans for us." Emma laughed, but there was a deep thought in her eyes. "It's very unexpected indeed," she replied, feeling her heart bloom a little at the warmth of his words. "But anyway, I've come to appreciate the peace that has come after all I've been through." She fell silent, staring at the sunset. The memory of Nick, although not completely forgotten, no longer caused the bitter feelings she had before. Now she could see that life goes on, and even after pain, one can find joy in new encounters and opportunities. James spoke to her again quietly. "I understand what you're going through, but I want you to know that I have patience and I'm willing to give you time. If you ever want to talk or just go for a walk, I'm always here for you." Emma looked at him and, although she felt afraid of a new relationship, she felt her heart begin to open up again to this new beginning. Emma felt something new in her relationship with James. His patience and understanding created an atmosphere of safety in which she could be herself. It was completely different from what she had experienced with Nick, where everything was based on lies and misunderstanding. Here, everything was open, without coercion and without illusions. One evening, when they were sitting in a cafe by the ocean again, James looked at her seriously. "Emma, I want to be honest with you. I don't know what's going to happen between us, but it's very important for me that you know that I'm not here to break your heart again. I just want us to have a chance to see if we have something more." These words echoed in her soul. They weren't a promise or a hint of something serious, they were simple, clear, and honest. Emma looked into his eyes and realized that her heart was no longer afraid. She wasn't ready for big promises and a relationship under pressure, but she was ready to try to open her heart again. "I appreciate your honesty, James. And I want to give us a chance too, but without rushing. No pressure." He smiled, and his eyes held the same confidence she'd felt from him from the beginning. She knew that this meeting could only be the first step to something new, without the shadow of the past still lingering in her heart. With each new day, she realized more and more that she was ready to move forward. Her heart was no longer held by the memories and disappointments of the past. She accepted the fact that life goes on, and even if her path with Nick was broken, it didn't mean that all future chances would be destroyed as well. With each new day she spent with James, Emma felt more and more confident. They walked to different places in the Hamptons, sharing their thoughts about the future without even discussing a serious relationship. Their meetings were as light as the wind on the shore, and with each new conversation, Emma appreciated more and more the peace he brought to her life. But even in these moments of relaxation, there was still that little piece of doubt inside her. She couldn't forget how her heart had been broken. She couldn't just let go of the past without wondering if this new beginning with James was just a reaction to her old wounds or if it was a real opportunity for happiness. One day, as they were walking along the waterfront, James brought up the topic of the future again. "Emma, I understand that you don't want to rush into anything right now. And I respect your position. But I'd like to know how you see your future. What's important to you when you think about a relationship?" Emma stopped, looking out at the ocean. She hadn't expected this question. All the previous conversations had been simple, without a hint of anything serious. "I think it's important to be honest with yourself," she replied after a pause, "and I want to be able to be honest with you. I'm not ready for a serious relationship right now. I just want to enjoy the moments without pressure. I want us to be able to just be together without any big expectations." James nodded, and his face didn't look disappointed. "I agree. We'll go at our own pace. The main thing is that we don't lose each other in the process." These words reassured Emma. She realized that she could afford to develop this relationship without too much pressure. And even if it didn't lead to anything big, it would still be part of her journey to healing. As the weeks passed, an easy relationship developed between Emma and James that was not rushed. They spent time together, laughed, talked about small things, but did not force anything serious. James was patient and attentive, and he didn't ask her for anything more than she was willing to give. Emma felt her heart gradually freeing itself from the heavy chains of the past. But one evening, when they were sitting in a restaurant again, something changed. James's gaze became more serious, his voice was calm, but there was a certain determination in it. "Emma, I want to tell you something," he began. "I understand that you want to move slowly, and I respect that. But you know, I feel like this is more than just time together for me. I want to know if you have a place for me in your life, even if it's not going to be easy." Emma was a little surprised by his words. She realized that James really felt more than just sympathy for her. But she also knew that she wasn't ready to open her heart completely. She paused, weighing her feelings. "James, you are very important to me and I appreciate the way you treat me. But I'm still scared. I can't forget what happened with Nick, and I don't know if I'm ready for a new relationship even if it seems so simple and natural. He didn't give up and took her hand. I'm not asking you to forget the past, I just want you to give a new future a chance. I am ready to be a part of this journey without any pressure. Emma felt how important these words were to her. She didn't have to stay in the past, she didn't have to live in the shadow of an old relationship. She could start a new chapter even if it was scary. I want to give this a chance, she said, looking him in the eye. And without ideals. Just you and me in our moments. James smiled, and it was a hopeful smile. She knew that this could be the beginning of something wonderful if they were honest with each other. As the weeks passed, the relationship between Emma and James became more open and deep. They no longer discussed the past, but focused on creating new memories together. Each of their days was filled with ordinary but important moments, walks under the stars, evenings when they cooked dinner together, or simple conversations about the future that had never been in her life before. Emma felt that she was no longer trying to avoid relationships and that James had given her the opportunity to believe in people again. She no longer compared him to Nick because she realized that every person is unique and you can't put them on the same scale. But still, there was a little anxiety in the back of her mind. It was hard for her to imagine herself with someone who wasn't Nick. But with each new day, she realized that life goes on and she has the right to open herself up to new possibilities. One day, during a walk in the woods together, James spoke seriously again. Emma, I want to ask you something. His voice sounded a little softer. Have you ever thought that we could be together for a long time? Not just tonight or tomorrow, but really for a long time. This question caught her off guard again. She looked at him and felt her heart skip a beat. She was ready to look to the future, but was she ready to take that step? I've thought about it, she answered slowly, and to be honest, I want to believe that we can be together. But I'm afraid I'll make a mistake again. I'm afraid I'll lose you like I lost Nick. James took her hand and she felt his warmth. And I don't expect anything more from you than what you're willing to give. We will move forward together step by step. But most importantly, we will be honest with each other. These words touched her soul. She realized that she shouldn't be afraid to step into the unknown if there is a person next to her with whom she wants to go this way. Time passed, and Emma realized that her heart was no longer burdened by past traumas. She learned to forgive herself for holding on to all those bitter memories for so long. She realized that every step she took toward a new beginning was not a betrayal of the past, but a move forward toward a new life. Her relationship with James became stronger. They took their time, did not put pressure on each other, and this gave them the opportunity to grow together without fear or uncertainty. They became true friends, partners, and even if they didn't have specific plans for the future, they created a present together that was important and valuable. One day, sitting on the ocean shore, James looked at her with a smile. Not because we're together, but because we can get through anything that comes our way without deceiving each other. We're not perfect, but together we can be a great team. Emma looked at him and replied, feeling her heart fill with peace and confidence. I'm glad we found each other too, and I'm no longer afraid to look to the future because I know we'll be honest with each other, even if it's not easy. These words became a kind of promise for both of them. They didn't know what the future would bring, but now they were ready for whatever changes it would require. And although their journey was not easy, they realized an important truth. Love does not require unconditional perfection. It requires honesty, support, and a willingness to grow together. At the end of every story, even if it has a beginning, middle, and end, there is always an important message. Never be afraid to move forward. The past can teach us, but it shouldn't stop us from building new, happier chapters in our lives. This story shows how important it is not to lose hope for a better relationship, even after painful disappointments. Sometimes we have to go through pain to realize what is really important in life. Honesty, openness, and willingness to change.